So, coming back, I kind of want to touch base on some more thoughts that I was having about some things that I said before. And I want to expand a little bit on something. I was talking about angels and demons, and I was talking about them being perfect or not, or why they were perfect or considered perfect and we're not. And I was thinking about what I had said, and I want to revisit that because the argument used, what I was saying was I thought in being imperfect or with sin, that sin meant that we rose against God, that we did something against God. And I thought that's what sin meant. But my brother was explaining it to me that sin is the inability to live forever. And as I was thinking about that again, that argument doesn't jive with me either, and this is why. If Satan and the demons are considered perfect and they rose against God and they are still in good working order physically, I guess, because they don't have the ability to die of natural causes the way that we do. Why? So he says that they were created perfect. Now, another thing that my brother had taught me when I was a child, that animals are considered perfect in the way that they are made. And animals do die. And there is no record that animals have ever rose up against God. So, if animals are considered perfect as they are, and they definitely die of natural causes, their bodies do not rejuvenate, and they have never rose against God. Then you have angels and demons that are considered perfect as they are. Angels, providing that they maintain their good standing with God, will continue to live a long, never-ending life. Whereas humans, we did rise up against God. Our forefathers supposedly did. We do not have the ability to maintain our livelihood. We die, most of us, less than 100 years, but there are a few exceptions that lived beyond 100 years. And there's evidence that people prior to the flood lived within 1,000 years of lifespan. Then there are other evidence that they lived 2,000 years lifespan. So, then, clearly there's something here that we're not getting. So, my question is, why are we the only ones that are required to eat of the tree of life in order to get everlasting life, to live forever, in other words? Now, Some churches teach that, but the majority of the teachings from Christianity is that you will go to heaven. But not all churches teach you're going to go to heaven. In fact, the Jews, to my understanding, do not believe in going to heaven after they die. There's, a lot of people around the world that believe in a resurrection. I've even talked to some Muslims who even believe in some form of a resurrection. But the majority of the Muslims I've talked to do believe in going to heaven or hell. But I have talked to some Muslims that do not believe in that doctrine. They believe that there's a hope to be resurrected, which is not the popular belief structure within Islam. So, that stands to reason then. If everyone was created perfect, then why would we be the only ones to be created imperfect? The more I think about this, the more I struggle with any teachings that they put out there. It doesn't make sense to me. Because why would a God who is perfect, who knows the future, why would he continue forward with all this trouble? I mean, to me, it seems like a whole lot of heartache and trouble to go through all of this knowing it's going to happen. So if you know it's going to happen, and if God is what we think he is, he's not the type of person to want to put his beautiful children through all that. Unless he has a purpose. The only way it makes sense to me is that it's supposed to teach us a valuable lesson. And the best way to learn is by experience, living through it. It's like the more I hear certain people describe God and why I should fear him, makes me not want anything to do with him. I don't want to hear about a God who favors one over another. I don't like that story of Cain and Able. I mean, really? Sibling rivalry at its best. That's what it is. Any parent knows you cannot favor one child over another. That's trouble waiting to happen. And seriously, God all-knowing, he's not gonna. He didn't figure that out. No. Please, if God is as wise as we think he is, no, he did not play favoritism. And if he did, that is not a God that I want to do anything with. Because I'm going to tell you something. I have 2 brothers and 1 sister. The 3 of them grew up close together in age. By the time I came around, the youngest one was 12. So I grew, even though I have 3 siblings, I grew up like an only child. And let me tell you something. Those other 3, anytime they see any kind of gestures that my parents did for me, ooh, they thought I was being favored. They resented me. I was just a little kid, you know. Everybody kept telling me how cute I was. I was living the lap of luxury. You know, by the time I came along, my parents were more firmly established. They weren't struggling young people anymore. They were a little bit older. And didn't matter. Did not matter. Even though my brothers were like teenagers, by the time, you know, I could enjoy all these little things that my parents were giving me, ooh, they kept saying what a spoiled brat I was. They wanted me to suffer. That's what they did. So my parents, you know, they knew what they had to keep quiet if they had to. So it's like, I'm thinking about like Cain and Able. No, that was sibling rivalry at its finest. And to show favoritism over one above the other, especially if Abel was the younger of the 2. No, I do not want anything to do with a God like that, if that's the case. But, and here's another issue. Speaking of Cain and Abel, why would God want a blood sacrifice anyway? Now, my understanding of animal sacrifices, it doesn't matter if it's the Jews or the Christians or whomever, when there is a sacrifice, somebody is eating the sacrifice. Be it the priests, be it the people in the village, I don't know. But someone is consuming the animal sacrifices. This is not animals that were cremated and gone up into heaven, as it were, in a puff of smoke. That meat was being used to fill somebody's belly. And quite realistically, it was probably going to the priests and their students, you know, their choir boys. They were probably all feasting on that. But with the idea of Cain and Abel, that immediate family were supposed to be the only people on earth. So if they were vegetarians at this point in time in history, because people didn't start eating meat until after the flood, that's when God gave them permission, and that's when God set down the rules to eating meat. That's when the whole kosher things got started, supposedly. So, what was the purpose of an animal sacrifice? They were not eating meat at that time, according to Bible teachings. I'm not talking historically, where we know hunters and gatherers. We know that they weren't using arrows to kill dandelions, okay? So, But that whole idea of an animal sacrifice. Now, I heard someone else, I think it was Monica was talking about that she heard Abel was sacrificing a child. It wasn't a lamb, it was a child. And I don't know. I wouldn't put it past them. You know, other people were sacrificing children. There were other civilizations that were doing things like that. Usually when people start offering up their children, it's oftentimes it's out of desperation. And I always think about that. They never want to sacrifice the old guy. You ever see that? They never want to sacrifice the old man who's lived a full life and make way for the young ones, you know. No. They want to kill off the young ones because the young ones are eating their food. That's what it boils down to. But like I've noticed that in the research that I've done, I've come across many storylines over the years where every year they have to sacrifice a virgin. And that was one of the things I've noticed about when my ex-husband and I went to Niagara Falls. They were talking about the Maid in the Mist, and that a chief's daughter, every year a virgin was sacrificed over the falls. And one year the chief was so sad that his daughter was being sacrificed over Niagara Falls that he went over the falls with her because he couldn't imagine life without her. And because of his sacrifice of himself, no other sacrifices were required. So I found it interesting that there are quite a few cultures where when the king makes the sacrifice, that no other sacrifices are required. And that's the whole idea about Jesus, is that when he was crucified, that he made the once and for all sacrifice for all of mankind, that no other sacrifices would be required, animal or children for that matter. And that's why Christians should not be practicing any sacrifice. And I think that's very interesting that a virgin, you have to sacrifice a virgin every year. But if you sacrifice the king, it solves the problem. And so I just be thinking, well, maybe we need to sacrifice more kings and solve all the problems. Especially today, we could keep a king line going. All we need is a deposit from his lower pouch. Put that on ice, and we can fertilize all kinds of princesses and have a whole slew of kings ready to go. at any time. Of course, we don't have any kings right now to sacrifice. I think about all this thing about religion and the level of lies and the whole scale of how they misrepresent the spirit of God and the whole divine. You know, it's all about selling it and making money. And it's fear based. And God is not interested in you fearing Him. He really isn't. God is about love. You know, I really don't even believe in the God. I believe in the goddess. Everything comes from the feminine. And that's another lie. You know, they want you to believe that God is a man. If you really think about it, God is neither either or. He's both and neither. But I look at the universe, that the whole universe is the body of the sacred divine. And we are all parts of that body. And I did some training to be a priestess. And I thought about how I wanted to do this work. And the one thing that I knew is I didn't want to come off as some kind of preacher on a pulpit, you know, trying to manipulate people and how to believe and what to believe. I didn't want anything to do with that. You know, I feel like people need to live their lives and they need to learn their lessons. And I don't want to intimidate people. I want to encourage. You know, so that's kind of like what my angle is. I want to encourage. I want to inspire. And, you know, they talk about being hot or cold with Christ. And I always thought to be cold was, you know, you're either for him or you're against him, you know, hot or cold. But that's not what cold means. You see, to be hot with Christ means to be passionate. It means to be vigorous. Whereas to be cold, it means to be refreshing and when I heard about that explained that way, to be cold, when you have like a hot day and you have that ice cold drink and you belt and you're like, that's what that means. And I was like, okay, don't be lukewarm. Be either hot or cold. Either be stimulating or refreshing. So that's kind of like what I want to do with my work. I want to be stimulating and I want to be refreshing. You know, I don't want to come off as some kind of preacher that thumping some Bible. I'll pick up the Bible, but I ain't gonna thump it. I'm gonna be, because I don't disrespect people's beliefs, but I do challenge them. And I want you to challenge me too. I've been through a big illness, and my mind isn't working as sharp as it used to. I have to be on a BiPAP machine when I sleep because before I was on that BiPAP, I would get this brain fog and I couldn't concentrate. It's because I wasn't breathing properly while I was sleeping. So now I have that BiPAP machine and I'm getting better. And I'm hoping to be off this thing sometime this year. I'm doing a lot better. I have a Fitbit and I keep track of my steps. And before I went into the hospital and got my BiPAP, I was only getting like 1,200 steps a day. And now I can get 2,000 very easily. It was before it was very hard. So I had upped it even more to 2,500, but that was still too challenging for me, even though I can manage to do it every now and then. To get over 3,000, I'm still better off just focusing on the 2,000 until I don't even have to think about, getting it in. And then I can up it some more. But I have been through a lot in these past 5 years. And while I was in the hospital the first time when this all first happened to me 5 years ago, I lost my ability to talk because I had a tracheotomy. And they had a little balloon that cut off my ability to speak. And not having the ability to speak and communicate what it is that I wanted or needed, or to ask questions even, that was so hard. And not knowing sign. I did not know sign language, and even if I did, they didn't speak sign language either. Of course, they would have gotten someone for me if that was, the case, but when you don't have the ability to speak and you're being mistreated, it really puts you through something. And Now that I have the ability to speak, I need to say what I have to say so that someone else who might be going through something similar will know that they're not alone and kind of let you know how to get through it. As weak as I was, I had that nursing home hopping. I was I was a temporary quadriplegic, and when they told me no, I don't know how I did it, where I found the strength, but I got that nursing home jumping. And they still be talking about me today. They don't even want me coming back to be a resident there. But yeah, so I just kind of want to talk about things that I see that doesn't make sense and kind of document it, share it with whomever might be interested. But that whole thing with Cain and Able doesn't jive. That's a major setup to get sibling rivalry going. Mm-mm. Okay. Well, I've yammered on long enough.